Hello friends, thank you for watching this channel, this video. I will be talking about the situation in Ukraine and around Ukraine, because this week, the last week in Ukraine was extremely tough and full of cases and political process. It looks like the United States and its allies have given Russia a new ultimatum, which also means the resumption of negotiations. France, together with European and Ukrainian partners, began work on the creation of a special tribunal for the crime of Russian aggression in Ukraine. At the same time, the creation of an appropriate international tribunal under the auspices of the United Nations may face the problem of legitimization, since the process requires sanction from the United Nations Security Council, where the Russian Federation will use the right of veto. At the same time, judging by the reaction of the federal channels of the Russian Federation, the topic of the tribunal is starting to worry the Russian leadership to a large extent. In particular, the idea is being developed that in the event of the loss of war in Ukraine, the punishment will inevitably affect absolutely all citizens without exception in the Russian Federation. Thus, they seek to mobilize Russian society, including the elites, to active resistance in the war for the survival of the nation in Ukraine. At the same time, the topic of the tribunal can be used by France to return France to negotiation and the mediation process between the sides or public relation. Since Emmanuel Macron immediately announced plans for a telephone conversation with Vladimir Putin after negotiations with the United States President John Biden. It's very interesting that the Chancellor of Germany, Scholz, called to Putin and make a statement that Russia should withdraw all the territory of Ukraine. The same statement made also Joe Biden. It looks like the France, Germany and the United States make an ultimatum to Russia that for starting peace negotiations, Russia should retreat, should withdraw all Ukrainian territory. We don't know about what amount of territory it means. Is there a place for Crimea or Donbass, or we are talking only about the territory which were occupied after the starting of war after the February 24th? We don't know, but we should state that negotiation process is very close. It's very close also because the dangers of development of widening this conflict to other regions and growing up the nuclear dangers and growing up the possibility of humanitarian catastrophe in Ukraine because of Russian strikes on our energy infrastructure. Also, the European Union is now working of all possible options for legal mechanisms for the confiscation of frozen Russian assets. We are talking about 330 billion United States dollars. The head of European Union, Ursula von der Leyen, believes that Russians' frozen assets should be used to restore damage to Ukraine from the war. So far, representatives of the European Union have admitted that they cannot confiscate the frozen assets of the Central Bank of Russia due to the international principle of state immunity. Instead of confiscating the assets of the central bank, it is proposed to establish a fund to manage liquid assets and use the profits to pay to Ukraine. Russian Federation continues its strategy of missile terror with the goal to the destruction of the Ukrainian critical infrastructure. On November 23rd, after the seventh massive attack by the Russian army, Ukraine experienced a partial blackout. 11 regions of Ukraine were completely without electricity, and in other regions there were serious interruptions in the internet, water and heat supply. The power units of all 3 nuclear power plants in the Ukraine were turned off, the work of which was partially restored only by the evening of November 24th. Also, the Russian Federation damaged almost all thermal power plants and large hydroelectric power plants in Ukraine. Nowadays, there is a shortage of electricity at a level of at least 20–30%. It means 50 or even more % for the needs of ordinary consumers. And emergency and planned blackouts for consumers continue in Ukraine. At the same time, Ukrainian authorities are already preparing public opinion for a possible complete power outage or planned power for several hours a day if shelling from Russian Federation continues. An additional tool for stabilizing the energy system of Ukraine can be import of electricity from Europe. Ukraine has already carried out a test import of electricity from Romania, increasing the supply of equipment for repairs and air defense, missile defense system, which should be sent to Ukraine. Authorities say the latest rocket attack have caused $1 billion in direct losses. The total damage to Ukraine's infrastructure already exceeds $100 billion. And the president of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky, said that in general the restoration of Ukraine after the war will require more than $1 trillion. At the front, due to the adverse weather conditions and the exhaustion of the sides, the fighting was transformed into a positional phase. At the same time, active confrontation continues in the certain sectors in the front. So in the Donetsk and Lugansk regions, the Russian army are trying to attack. Active military operations on the front section from the city of Bakhmut and the city of Soledar to the city of Marinka. In Zaporizhia and Kherson regions, they are conducting defense. The armed forces of Ukraine are holding back the advance of the Russian army in the area of the city of Bakhmut. But the situation here is becoming more complicated. The Russian army are trying to bypass the city from the south. Kurdyumovka, which is located south of the city of the Bakhmut and occupies heights that allow Russian artillery to strike at the settlement of Chasov Yar and the city of Konstantinovka. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine reports that Russia is preparing to start a new wave of covert mobilization from December 10. In addition, the group is expected to strengthen due to the transfer of units from the territory of Belarus. The position of Ukrainian troops at the front directly depends on Western arms supplies. In addition, due to the Russian shelling of energy infrastructure, Ukraine is in dire need of new air defense system. In particular, the NATO countries are discussing the possible supply of Patriot air defense system to Kyiv. In total, partner countries have provided about $40 billion in arms to Ukraine, roughly the size of France's annual defense budget. President of United States Biden promised and addressed to the Congress of United States to take additional $37 billion for Ukraine. Так, ушло наверх. Верните. The total declared amount of financial and military assistance has already reached 93 billion euros as of for October 1 this year. At the same time, the shortage of weapons and ammunition for them in NATO countries publicly announced by the Western media can be viewed as a public formation preparation for explanation why Ukraine may receive less of it in the future. And this can create significant difficulties for the new counteroffensive of the armed forces of Ukraine. It should be also the tool for influence to Ukraine from the Western partners. The European Union countries are now seriously working on and considering all possible options for legal mechanism for the confiscation of frozen Russian assets, about 330 billion. The European Parliament adopted a resolution recognized Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism, but against the background of European Union's efforts to bring the Russian Federation to account as much as possible, the accidentally announced by the head of European Commission the figure of loss of Ukrainian troops, 1,000 dead and wounded, may additionally activate supporters of the winter truce. Indeed, in recent years, both in the United States and European countries, they are increasingly talking about the need to peace negotiation to resolve the conflict in Ukraine. Since the West fears significant consequences of the continuation of active hostilities for the energy sector, energy price, and the humanitarian crisis, new waves of mass immigration from Ukraine. As a rule, various versions of a possible world are voiced by foreign media, for example, the conditional Sullivan plan. At the same time, the official position of the United States, the White House, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the Ministry of Defense has not changed. Ukraine decides for itself when it will be ready for negotiation and what is considered a victory. In Ukraine, they insist on their previous position, withdrawal of Russian troops from all entire territory of Ukraine within the borders of 1991, and do not show readiness for any compromises in the Russian Federation either. This week, the political religious issue has intensified in the domestic politics of the country. So the SBU conducted searches in the Kiev-Pechesk Lavra and in several churches and monasteries of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church in Rivne, Frankivsk, Chernigiv, Chernivtsi, Zaporozhye, Transcarpathia, Kirovograd, and other regions. These investigations were probably the result of waves of informational discreditation of Ukrainian Orthodox Church and accusation of a pro-Russianness to which law enforcement agencies, in particular the special SBU of Ukraine, cannot but respond. Although this situation was influenced by the issue of building a national church, the conflict between the part of president's entourage and some key church activists and the playing of the religious card by the part of regional and political forces. One part of the government team may believe that Ukrainian Orthodox Church should become the basis of the national church and intensify the process of transferring the communities of this church to the national church. And in particular, they are trying to prevent the extension of the lease agreement for the use of the Kiev-Pechesk Lavra with the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, which ends in December of this year, as well as to obtain the right to conduct divine services of the Orthodox Church on the territory of the Lavra. The other part of this team either calls to distance themselves from the church process at least until the end of the war, or consider the Ukrainian Orthodox Church to be the basis for national church. Probably the outcome of this discussion will determine the further course of the events around the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. Until the end of the year, the filling of the state budget of Ukraine will be carried out, included through the issuance of the hryvnia, which provoked the depreciation of the national currency and inflation growth in October it reached 26.6%. And by the end of the year may exceed 30%. Taking into account the fact that by the end of 2022, the issue will add another 30 billion hryvnias, then the total amount will be near 400 hryvnia billions as war envisaged this year's budget. The economic consequences of the war in Ukraine are being felt around the world. World commodity prices have risen substantially, supply chain disruptions have worsened, and inflation has risen in the most countries in the world. The war in Ukraine has lowered the global GDP forecast for this year by $1 trillion United States dollars. Thank you, friends, for watching this video. Please write down your question. Don't forget to subscribe and make a like for this video. Thank you very much. See you next time.